They say a man can outrun his past if he rides fast enough, but I ain't never seen it done. Not truly. The war still lives in my hands when they shake, and in the way I don't look folks in the eye. I've buried more men than memories, and most nights I sleep beside both. My name is Silas Creed, and if you're looking for a hero, you best keep riding. Me? I just patch up horses and try not to want for anything. Desire's a dangerous hunger in a town like Burnt Ridge. The dust hadn't settled 10 minutes after I rode in before the whispers started. They moved slick through the street like smoke through cotton. I caught my name in one, an Apache girl in another. That was all it took. My mouth went dry, and the sun suddenly felt heavier on my shoulders. Nita. Her name was a hush I held close, something between a prayer and a wound. I never touched her. Not really. Not the way they claimed. But God help me. I thought about it. The way she looked when the canyon wind caught her hair. The way she sat stiller than silence itself, like she'd been born from stone. She worked the livery sometimes, mending tack or soothing the frightened mares. Didn't speak much, but when she did, it was always something worth hearing. They hated that about her, the quiet grace. Folks here only understood loud things, guns, men, and Sunday sermons. Nita didn't belong to any of them, and that made her dangerous. I passed the saloon and saw Sheriff Clay Dubbs leaning on the rail outside, thumbs hooked into his belt like he thought the whole world hung from it. His gaze met mine for a breath too long. He tipped his hat slow, like he was waiting for me to flinch. I didn't. Creed, he said, voice molasses thick. Heard you've been keeping strange company out by the canyon. I keep to myself, I answered. He smirked. That ain't what the boys been saying. Saw her sneak in off to your camp a few nights back. You trying to tame a wild thing? I didn't answer. A man only dignifies questions worth hearing. I walked on. The courthouse bell rang out across the square. A tight knot of townsfolk was gathering, moving like ants toward a spilled crumb. I followed slow, uneasy. The sun hovered near its peak, painting everything in a cruel gold. Then I saw her. They had tied her to a mesquite pole at the edge of the gallows, wrists lashed above her head. Not hanging, not yet. Just there, like a lesson. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks, streaked with dust and blood. Her dress was torn at the hem, feet bare, skin red from sun and shame. But her eyes, they burned, fierce and unblinking. Nita didn't cry. She didn't plead. She stared out over the crowd like they were already ghosts. A boy near the front threw a clod of dirt at her legs. She didn't flinch. I wanted to kill him for it. Sheriff Dubbs stood on the platform, holding a Bible like a weapon. This here girl, he announced, was caught in moral treason, corrupting a white man with savage ways. She defiled herself and dishonored this town. There were no charges, no trial, just spectacle. 7 days she'll hang like this, Dubbs declared. 7 days to cleanse her soul and remind the rest of you what happens when order's defied. The crowd murmured approval. They called her whore, witch, red devil. Some just watched in silence, like me, like cowards. I wanted to rush her, to cut her down, to bane this damn town to the ground. But the eyes were too many, guns on too many hips. Instead, I stood and listened to my heartbeat roar like gunfire in my ears. One of the church ladies tossed a white cloth at her feet, muttering something about shame. Nita turned her head slowly and locked eyes with me across the square. Not an inch of hate in her, not even then. Just a quiet knowing. I had failed her, not in secret, but in public. I had let them take her. The sun dropped a little lower, shadows growing long like old guilt. Folks began to drift away, satisfied with their cruelty for the day. But I stayed. I watched the light move across her skin. I watched her knees tremble from thirst and strain. I watched her dignity stand untouched in the date. I walked to the edge of the square and laid down a canteen near the base of the pole. Didn't speak. Didn't dare. Just set it there and turned away, every step cutting deeper. Behind me, a voice, quiet as wind, slipped through the air. You came too late, Silas. It was the first time she'd ever said my name. My boots stopped dead, heart lurching like a frightened colt. I didn't turn around. I'll come again, I said. A pause. I won't be here. I walked on, fists clenched, breath ragged. Her voice chased me, stuck in the hollows of my chest. The town was quiet now, but I felt the pressure building, the storm in my gut rising. At the edge of my camp that night, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, just sat staring into the fire like it owed me answers. I had left the world behind after the war because I thought I'd seen all the cruelty it had to offer. I was wrong. In the still dark, I heard coyotes wail in the distance. But it wasn't them that kept me up. It was the echo of a voice, soft and steady, telling me I was too late. I didn't sleep that night. And come dawn, I wasn't Silas Creed the horse doctor anymore. I was a man with a reckoning to make. Because they hung the Apache girl on a pole for loving a white man. But I swore she wouldn't suffer for it. Not alone. Not again. The canyon never spoke unless it had something worth saying. That night, it whispered only her name. I rode hard beneath a moon sharp enough to cut bone, my coat flapping behind me like a flag of surrender. The desert wind stung my face, bitter with regret and dust, and each hoofbeat struck the ground like a vow I hadn't dared make until now. Nita was still out there, tied, broken, proud, and I'd done nothing but watch. Cowardice lives quiet in a man. It don't scream, it seeps in slow, disguised as reason. But shame? Shame hollis. Shame don't let you sleep. The town had settled into the hush of midnight, save the clink of bottles behind saloon doors and the soft crunch of boots when night patrols circled. I knew Dobbs would post men near the gallows. Not many, just enough to prove a point. Burnt Ridge was all spectacle, little substance. I hitched my mare just shy of the general store and moved through the alleys like a ghost with a purpose. My hands were steady, for once. My heart was not. The square was a hollow thing under starlight. No crowd, no noise, just Nita, swaying from the pole like a torn prayer. Her arms sagged in their bindings, head bent forward, hair clumped with blood. She looked small in the dark, and still she didn't break. I waited for the guard rotation. 2 men, sleepy-eyed and loose at the jaw. One wandered off to piss behind the church wall. The other lit a cigarette and turned his back to her. He was young. Probably thought he was righteous. Thought he'd done his part to keep the town clean. I crept up behind him with the silence war taught me and wrapped one arm around his throat, the other pressing steel to his ribs. He went down quick, surprised more than anything. I dragged him behind the trough, tied him with his own belt, and stuffed his mouth with his bandana. When I reached her, she stared, not startled, just aware, eyes open like they'd never been shut. "Don't scream," I whispered, knife already at the rope. "Don't flatter yourself," she rasped, voice cracked but sharp. A dry laugh broke in my throat as the bindings gave way. She collapsed into me, not from trust, but gravity. I caught her and held tight. Her skin was ice under the desert heat. "You should have let me fall sooner," she murmured. "Couldn't," I said. "Didn't know how." We didn't speak more as I slipped her onto my horse, wrapped her in my coat, and rode out under the stars like the devil himself was watching. In a way, he was. She didn't ask where we were going. I reckon she knew. There was only one place we'd ever belonged. The canyon met us like an old friend, hushed, wide, holy. I led the horse along the ridgeline until we reached the cave she once showed me, a hollow above the river where wild mint grew. I laid her down on the cool earth, started a fire low and quiet, and fetched water from the stream. She sipped slow, wincing, then leaned back against the stone. Her face was shadowed, but her eyes found me through the flames. "You killed them?" she asked. "No," I said. "Not yet." She closed her eyes. "I dreamed they tied you there too," she said softly. I sat beside her, back to the wall. "I think I was already there," I answered. We spent the night in silence, her drifting in and out, me watching the fire shrink. At dawn, I checked her wrists. Rope had bit deep, left bruises like fingerprints. I cleaned them with what little whiskey I had left, bandaged them with my shirt. She never winced once. By noon, I spotted dust rising in the distance. Riders. Dobbs wouldn't let her go without turning it into a story. He needed blood to feed the myth. Needed someone to point at and say, "See what happens when you cross me?" I took my rifle and climbed the southern ridge, heart heavy with the kind of peace that comes after you've decided a thing can't go unpunished. Nita didn't ask me to fight. She didn't have to. There were 4 of them, Dubs and 3 deputies, riding fast, their horses strained from the heat. I watched them approach the narrow pass below, a natural choke point between 2 jagged rock faces. I aimed for the lead horse and fired. The beast shrieked and fell, Dubs tumbling hard to the date. The others scattered, ducking for cover. I fired again, clipping a man's shoulder. He screamed and scrambled back. "Creed!" Dubs shouted, crouched behind his fallen mount. "You lost your mind." "No," I called back. "Just found what's left of it. We'll string you up with her." "You already tried." A pause, then the sharp click of his revolver. He leaned out to shoot. I was faster. One shot through his collarbone sent him spinning backward. He landed hard, coughing wet and loud. Blood soaked his shirt as he writhed. The other 2 fled. No heroics, no last stand. Just fear in their spares. I climbed down slow, rifle still warm in my grip. Dubs lay on his back, staring up at the sky like he couldn't believe it had come to this. "She ain't worth it," he gasped. "She's worth more than you ever were." He bled out in the dust, alone. I stripped his badge and threw it into the canyon. The echo it made when it hit the rocks below sounded almost like justice. When I returned, Nita was standing just outside the cave, leaning on the wall but upright. Her eyes scanned the ridge behind me, then dropped to the rifle in my hand. "It's done?" she asked. "Almost." She nodded once. Then, without a word, she stepped forward and laid her palm on my chest, right over my heart. It was the first time she touched me, and I felt it, like something buried had finally been pulled into the sun. Behind us, the wind moved through the canyon like breath. I knew then, we weren't ghosts anymore. We were fire. We were thunder in waiting. And tomorrow, the town would hear us roar. Dawn broke slow, brushing the canyon walls in hues of copper and ash. Nita stood barefoot in the river, her dress clinging wet to her frame, arms held open to the sky as if asking it to explain itself. I watched her from a distance, not out of reverence, but because she had that kind of stillness that demanded space. It wasn't just her body healing. It was something deeper, older, a defiance being reborn. I'd never seen someone carry pain like armor. Most folks crumble under weight like that, but Nita wore hers like she was born with it, stitched from scars, threaded with pride. She didn't weep for what they did to her. She wept only once, when I told her Dubs was dead. Not for him, for the necessity of it. We stayed in the canyon 3 days, maybe 4. Time got slippery. I rebuilt a shelter near the cave, cut wood for a fire, caught trout from the river. Nita worked in silence, braiding bundles of sage, tending the wounds on her wrists. We didn't talk much, but the quiet between us softened, stopped being sharp. Every now and then, she'd glance at me, not with affection, not yet, but with the kind of look that meant I was no longer a stranger. She braided a red thread into my coat one morning, said nothing about it, just did it and walked away. I left it there. Felt like a tether. But peace is a thing that don't sit still long out here. By the 5th day, we saw smoke, thin, gray, curling from the west. Riders would come again, not to rescue Dubs this time, but to punish us for ending his story without permission. Law in Burnt Ridge wasn't about justice. It was theater, and someone had torn the curtain down. "They'll burn the canyon if they can't find us," Nita said, voice flat. "They won't." Her eyes held mine. "Then we meet them. Clean. No hiding." I didn't argue. Some things in a person won't bend twice. We set the trap that night, dismantled the bridge that led to the upper trail, scattered caltrops on the pass. Nita knew the land like it was blood. She painted her face with ash and ochre, not for ceremony, but memory. I loaded my rifle and tucked my father's old revolver into her belt. "You sure?" I asked. She looked at me, face unreadable. I was sure the day they tied me up. The next morning, the riders came. 6 of them. The preacher, the mayor's boy, men I'd shot horses for, all dressed like righteousness. They didn't expect the pass to collapse when the lead horse stepped onto it. Didn't expect the walls to thunder down in a cloud of dust and shale. We didn't fire until they scattered. Nita was the first to shoot. Clean. Precise. One man screamed and fell, clutching his leg. Another turned and ran. I picked off the third as he raised his rifle. It all happened fast, but inside me, time crawled, each breath thick with fire and choice. The preacher ducked behind a rock, shouting scripture like it could shield him. "Come out," I called. "Ain't no salvation where you're hidden." He answered with a shot that clipped my shoulder. I dropped back, biting off a keris. Blood ran warm into my shirt. Nita moved to my side, pressing a cloth to the wound. "Don't faint," she said. "Wouldn't dare," I rasped. She stood, aimed, and waited. The preacher tried to run. She didn't miss. When the dust settled, 3 bodies lay still. 2 riders fled with nothing but fear in their saddlebags. The canyon swallowed them without ceremony. I leaned against the rock wall, breath shallow, pain radiating in pulses. Nita stood over the ridge, rifle slung across her shoulder, eyes hard and unreadable. "It's done," I said. "No," she whispered. "Now it begins." We burned the bodies, not out of hate, but because the land demanded it. The canyon takes what's left behind. That night, under a sky punched full of stars, she sat beside me, close enough to feel the heat of her skin. She took my hand, turned it palm up, and traced the lines there like she was reading scripture of her own. "You didn't save me," she said. "No," I answered. "You saved yourself." She nodded, then leaned her head against my shoulder, and for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to flee. In the weeks that followed, no one came. Burnt Ridge turned quiet. Maybe they buried the story. Maybe they made a new one. Didn't matter. We built a life at the edge of silence. One sunrise, one gesture at a time. She planted tobacco, hung wind chimes from juniper branches. I learned to speak less and mean more. One morning, I woke to find her gone. No note, no goodbye, just a single red thread left where my coat had hung. I searched the canyon for a full day, but I knew she hadn't been taken. She'd simply gone. The fire still burned. Her presence lingered in every stone, every whispering wind. But she wasn't mine to hold. Never had been. Loving her meant letting her walk when she chose to. Years passed. I stayed in the canyon, grew gray and slow. Folks from nearby towns brought horses for healing, and sometimes left stories. None ever mentioned her, but some nights, I'd find a braid of sage on my doorstep, or hear a song drifting in the wind that I hadn't heard since the canyon first held us. She was out there, living, and that was enough. If you're hearing this tale now, maybe it's 'cause you're carrying a hurt you ain't named yet. Or maybe you're just looking for a story that ends with more than bullets and blood. Either way, listen close. Love ain't always a rescue. Sometimes it's a reckoning. Sometimes it's 2 people choosing to stand in the fire together, not to be saved, but to be seen. And if you're lucky, real lucky, it leaves behind something that can't be hung or burned or buried. It leaves behind a life,